So yes, what is front end development? Um, Basically everything you see when you use a browser or a mobile app is front end, right? It is also called the client side. There's also the back end, where some of the data you present on the front end is being displayed. So as a front end developer, your role is to majorly work with the designs that the UI UX person has designed. In most cases, you would be working with a UI designer, right? And also a backend developer, majorly. And what you'll be doing majorly will be converting Figma prototypes to an actual web application or a mobile application, depending on the need of the organization or your clients. So, what are the core pillars, or what are the foundational should I say skills? No, I would say the foundational technologies you need for being a front end developer, right? First, you need the three basic um, programming languages, right? Though people would say HTML is not a programming language, but then you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Those are the three core programming languages you need. And then your tools, the browser, um, and your code editor. But before we jump into the tools, let's try to understand the three core programming languages, right? HTML is short for Hypertext Markup Language. So this language is majorly like your word processor, right? If you've ever used Word, I'm guessing a whole lot of us have used Word, right? You would notice you can create a paragraph, a an header, bullet points, um, quotes. All of these things you do on your word processor, HTML allows you to do it when you are trying to create a web application or a website. Um, Sorry, I can't actually share my screen, so there's an issue. I would have tried to demo something for you guys, but um, let's just make do with the slides for now, right? So you can create links also, right? On your web page, you can create links. There's also CSS. So what CSS is styling. Um, when you build a website, right, you notice with websites there are a whole lot of colors, the layouts, the text are arranged in very organized manner. There are images, um, so all of that styling is done by CSS, right? If you take a web page and you disable the CSS, what you would see is a document like structure, like what you have on your Word. So CSS is basically what styles your website, right? You Without the CSS, what you just have is your Word document on a web page. That is basically how a whole lot of web pages were built. I mean, in the early 2000s, CSS was not as advanced as it is right now, and a whole lot of the website then were just built with HTML and tables and all of that. But when you see beautiful websites like this one you are looking at, um, be rest assured that they used a whole lot of CSS, right? So CSS is basically for styling. HTML is for your markup, right? Your text, your headers, all of that. Then there's a third horseman here, JavaScript. So this is where people would usually say, okay, now you're writing a you're a programmer, now you're writing programs, right? Because JavaScript is similar to almost every other programming language you can think of in the world, right? There are a couple of instructions that you need to follow to create something, right? And a lot of the syntax and the way you write it is similar to, say, someone that is going to be writing Python, for example, right? With HTML and CSS, you do not have certain um, certain structures like your if statement, for example, right? You cannot say, oh, if this is happening, do this. That is why people do not refer to HTML and CSS as a programming language, right? You do not have, I think CSS has functions now, but before now, you could not write functions in CSS, right? But we'll not really go into JavaScript. JavaScript is a bit out of the scope of what we are going to be talking about today. Um, but you can also take time out to check up these three tools. Okay, so now we'll move to the tools. The tools will need to be front end developers, right? So first, we need a text editor. Um, Before now, a whole lot of Windows laptop comes with what we call Notepad plus plus or Notepad generally. But Notepad is kind of limited, right? In the sense that it does not allow you um see highlighted. Ah man, I think the fact I can't share my screen is really a setback. Um I, what can I do? Think I need to show you guys what the text editor looks like. Mm, okay, sorry, give me a minute. Let me just take a screenshot and see how I can share that. So let me share this with you guys. Come in. So guys, please check the chat section. You should be able to see an image I dropped. So that is a text editor, right? So what the text editor allows you to do is highlight some of the code you are going to be working on, help you arrange them in organized manner so that you can easily work with any application, any code base, right? So you need a text editor. So the most popular one is VS Code, but people also use Sublime and Atom. But I think VS Code and Sublime should be fine if you are going to be working with front end applications. I think it's easier to work with. I've never used Atom, um, so I think then you need your web browser. So essentially, as a web developer, a front end developer, your application is going to be running on the web, right? If you're a mobile developer, I mean, the browser is also on the web, so you are going to be running the application on the web. But then when you're a mobile app developer or a, what's it called now, or a developer that is focused on just building applications for certain systems, then you might not need a web browser. But if you are going to be working on web applications, your Chrome, your Internet Explorer, Safari, Edge browser, they are your tools, right? So every web page you visit in the world needs a web browser for you to interact with it. What you are looking at currently on my screen, oh sorry, you can't see my screen, but Zoom is also on you are also accessing this Zoom majorly maybe from your web browser. Some of you might be using your Zoom application, right? So you need a web browser. There's also something called the Git version control. This is so I don't know how I'm going to make this a bit easier for you guys to understand, but basically when you build applications, right, and you are working in a team, you need a system that allows multiple people also work on that project, right? Let's say I am building an application and I am the only one working on it. It's fine if I don't want to use Git. I mean, if I just want to write the code for myself, I can decide, okay, I'm just going to keep this code base on my laptop because I don't intend to share it or something. But when you are working in a team of two, three developers, right, you need something to allow you share with others, right, and so that you guys can work in a team, right. So that is where Git comes in. If I make a change locally and I push it to Git, every other person that has that Git repo can easily pull that change and see the change I made. So it just allows people in a team to work together, right? And a whole lot of organizations in the world use Git, but then they use different vendors. There's GitHub, there's GitLab, there's Bitbucket, right? So yeah. So now on the HTML basics, remember I told you HTML is similar to using a word processor, right? So a whole lot of things you can do on your word processor. Hello, is someone saying something? Please, can you guys hear me? You can call my attention back if I missed something or if something is not clear.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So remember, I said HTML is basically like your word processor, right? If you've ever used the word processor, like your words to write a document or something, just think of HTML as that, right? From writing headings to paragraphs to lists, bullet points. In HTML, it's called a list. Um, to quotes, to all of those things, right? That is what HTML is, right? But before you start to write HTML, you need to understand that there's a structure to it, right? You don't just start writing HTML. You don't just open your code editor. Remember, your text editor is where you are going to be writing most of your applications, right? So you don't just open your text editor and start writing. You have to understand the structure of how HTML is, right? That is where following tutorials also or following um, sites like W3 School. Let me just drop that in the charts so you guys can check it out. Come in. So it's w3schools.com, right? There's also freecodecamp.org. right? So you can check out these websites. Free Code Camp has like a learning part that starts with. I would advise you use Free Code Camp because they have a learning part that starts with HTML, then it takes you through to CSS, then JavaScript, right? So it's easier for you to go from step one to step two to step three easily, right? And then you can also save your progress. So I advise you use Free Code Camp, right? Um, so let's get back to HTML. So basically, HTML has a structure, right? If you want to start writing HTML in your text editor, remember the text editor like VS Code or Sublime, right? You have to start with your HTML tag. So there's something they call an opening and a closing tag, right? So you can see here it says HTML element consists of opening and closing tags with content in between, right? So if you look at the H1, for example, when you write an H1, you also have to close the tag, right? By using a closing tag, H1 slash. So guys, if you can see my open screen, right, you would see exactly this is how an HTML project looks like, right? So you start with your opening HTML tag, right? And the doc type HTML is basically will I say syntactic sugar. So what that is just like metadata. If you do not add that, I don't think there's an issue with your application, right? But yeah, so this is how you start an HTML application with the HTML and then some metadata, right? The head section of your HTML, which is this head here, is where your meta information, everything you don't see on this browser screen, right, is stored here, right? Everything you see on this browser screen is stored in the body. Please, can you guys see my open screen? You can just drop a thumbs up so I know you guys are
Yeah.
following. Okay, right. So the head is where you store metadata. If you look at your browser, if you're on your laptop, right, you would see for every website you visit, you would usually see an icon, right? And for example, a title. For every page you visit, especially on Chrome, I'm on Chrome now, you would see like an image, like an icon. It's called a favicon, right? You would see it there. And if you over the website, you will see like a title, right? Those are the metadata. So the favicon is usually also stored between these head tags here, right? And you can see this title. Yeah, so this title tag is what displays the title you see when you over a site on your browser, right? But once it comes to building applications, right, and what your users get to see and every other thing on the web page is usually written between these body tags, right? The body tag is the presentation layer. Everything you are going to be showing your clients, your users, you would write them between these body tags, right? So what are the major body tag elements? Because remember, the head is for meta information, right? And it has its own markup tags that you use, like meta, title, link, um, link. Sometimes script. You can put your script in your head tag. Which other one? I think those are the ones I can remember for now, right? Those tags should only go into your head section. You should not put them in your body, right? They are useless in the body and it won't work, right? But when it comes to your body, where you are presenting or showing something to your users, remember I said that HTML is just like Word documents, right? So everything you can do in your Word, right? Those tags, you put them in your body because that is what the users will be seeing. So P, for example, is paragraph, right? So if you want to create a text, you use your paragraph tag, right? So you can see the paragraph has an opening and a closing tag, right? So if Mayor, can you just type something between the tags, between the paragraph? Just type anything random. I exactly. Yeah. So I am a good boy. Do you have this open in your browser so I can just show them? Sorry about me not being able to share my screen. I don't know. I have some permissions not being allowed.
Yes.
Yeah, please. Exactly. So now you can see that I am a good boy is showing inside your browser, right? So it's just like you're writing Word. We are using Word document or something. So basically, this is how it's going to show. Remember, I said that CSS is for styling, right? So as it is right now, it looks bland, it looks blank, like nothing is happening, right? If you are going to achieve what major websites have currently, you would need your CSS part to give it style, to make it look beautiful. So you just think of CSS as what makes every website you look at attractive and pleasing to the eyes, right? So look at this slide, this page you're looking at. If there was no CSS, right, you won't be seeing this blue background here, right? The text won't be of different font size, right? You can see the HTML basic structure and content is bigger than the other text on this section of the page, right? So this is all what CSS does, right? It gives you beauty, makes it more attractive, more appealing to the eyes, right? So can scroll to the next section. Yeah, so CSS basic styling for your websites, right? So CSS has rules too. The way your HTML has tags, right? CSS has rules, right? So sorry, Miracle, can you go to your VS Code? No, no, no. Go to the VS Code, your code editor. Exactly. So now we have our HTML, right? So you'll be thinking, okay, how do we add styles? So there are a couple of ways you can add styles to a web page or an HTML document, right? You are either adding it inline from an external style sheet or internally, right? So if you look at this paragraph tag, you can see that there's something called ID equals demo. So what this does is it kind of references, it puts like a tag on the, let me not use tag again. It puts like a reference on this particular HTML tag, right? So what that does is if I now want to apply a CSS style to this particular paragraph, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what they call an ID selector because this is an ID, and I would say hash demo. So this is the structure of a CSS hash demo, then an opening bracket and a closing bracket. Then I can say color is blue. So you guys can just check the comment section, the chat section, right? So this is the structure of CSS basically. Remember we've talked about the structure of HTML, opening and closing tags. So this is the structure of CSS generally, right? So your job as a front-end developer is to just know these structures. It comes with time, with practice, muscle memory. Every day you try to create these HTML tags, right? With time, it just becomes muscle memory. You can do it without thinking. The same thing with your CSS. Once you understand how it looks, it's easier going forward, right? So now, if can you go back to the go back to the CSS. Yeah, scroll up a bit. No. Yeah, just on this page exactly. Exactly. So you see in the selectors part, what I've just done is I've used the hash demo selector, right, to reference the paragraph text in the HTML, right? So it's those tags are usually called selectors, right? You can either use those tags or just select the HTML elements by itself, right? So this still more in depth than this, but let's just move on for now, right? Um okay, so someone says, how do I create the file in the editor? Okay, yeah, so creating the file in the editor is quite easy. Sorry, Mayor, can you exactly? So once you already have an editor, right? Now, can you see this new file or folder, depending on what you want to do, right? If you open your editor and you want to create a folder, right? So now I'm referring to VS Code, right? If you have VS Code installed and you want to create a folder, just come here. Can you bring your arrow down a bit? Yeah, come exactly. So you would see new folder and new file. Exactly. So if you want to create a folder, but now you want to create an HTML file, so you click on file, click on create new file, new file. Exactly. So to create the new file, you just say index, right index. Okay, there's already an index.html, so you can just say no, take clean that. So you can just say no, take that off. Yeah, you can just delete it. Yeah, so click on create new file. Yeah. Then you can just say page.html. So there's something I missed out, right? Yeah, .html. HTML. Exactly. So your code editor already knows that okay, this is an HTML. This is why it's good to use a code editor. It already knows this is an HTML. Then you see this. You see this little icon, this orange icon beside it. Yeah, the like an opening and closing tag beside it here. So it's telling you okay, this is an HTML document. So one thing I forgot to add was you need to add the extension, right? For every file you are creating, you also need to add the extension. If you do not add the extension, your code editor would not be able to recognize the file you are working with. So for HTML, if you want to create an HTML file, you'd you'd usually name it, you'd name it say page.html in your code editor, right? So I've dropped it in the chat. If you want to create a CSS file, You use your editor to create a new file and add .css